Hollow Moonshine says, Brian,
back.
would you ever get a variable rough-scaled bush viper?
So, Bruce,
yes.
Bruce is giving the yes signal. Yeah, of course I'd love to, and I've had this conversation. We were even talking about it earlier today because you guys are adding a venomous room into. So tell me a little bit about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, forget about that. I mean, let's. What I'm trying to say is.
So we've talked about it a couple times on some videos. We're working on making some more display cages for some animals on the first floor of the building, and we're working on we want to work on some venomous displays. So we got it. Like we've recently got in some new gaboon vipers and stuff like that for some big displays. And one of the biggest things, of course, is we have 7 king cobras.
Right,
so we need big cages.
Yeah,
for
they
those.
get big. Yeah, Kings get a little bit big. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're working on that right now. So so some cool things to come.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I've talked about the fact that I'd love to add. Obviously Bruce is a big venomous guy, and we would love to add venomous snakes to the Reptarium. But again, you got to know which hill to die on, right? And venomous snakes is not that hill.
It's not
for
that
me.
hill, no.
And Lori would literally Carol Baskin me to death
on a hill.
On a hill, in front of everybody. So Lori's really, for whatever reason, and I don't necessarily totally disagree with her. Mm-hmm. She knows how I am. I get reckless. I get into like really into things, and I've always said probably if I own king cobras, I probably get bit one day because I'm going to push the envelope because that's just who I am. Like what happens is I'm always like go into things like I remember Jay, were you with me when I was like, don't let me touch something when we were doing a venomous snake? I'm like on the road. It might have been Aaron Jones, maybe.
Yeah.
It was Aaron,
I think you might be right.
It was Aaron Jones. Yeah. So it was a baby monocle king cobra, or not monocle king cobra, a baby monocle cobra, like a yearling monocle cobra that a friend was bringing over, and Aaron Jones was going to take pictures of it, and I was going to do a little film piece on it.
Yeah.
And I said, Aaron, don't let me touch that animal. I said, don't let me mess with it. I said, just I'll cook it and do whatever, but like make sure I'm cool. Literally 2 seconds after it's out of the thing, I'm like playing
tickling
with it.
You're like, look at his face.
I'm like touching it on the head, and I'm like, it's like I can't help myself. I just can't help myself. And so I know that if I kept venomous for any length of time, I would get bit.
Yeah.
Now you're obviously Cobra Keeper Junior. So tell me where that came from.
My dad.
Your dad. Mm-hmm. So your dad kept cobras.
Yep. I'm back in Florida as a teenager.
As a teenager.
So
do you aspire to keep cobras?
I would soon.
Yeah.
When their laws, because I can only keep native venomous.
Right.
So hopefully their laws change, and I'll be able to keep monocles and kings, depending on my mom, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, and speaking of the Georgia laws, I mean, we just, obviously there's some pretty sad news about South Carolina. Yeah. So sounds like... Do you think that's what it is no non-native venomous reptiles in South Carolina? USARC.org. You can check out there you go. You can check out the release there, all about South Carolina. Go support them. It's H3056, but it sounds like there was no committee on this, right?
No. So I talked with Phil not long after I saw the thing for it, and basically it sounds like they were able to wedge it in because as long as it's relating to the same topic that the bill is on, they can
which
make
was like on
amendment.
pigs or something like that.
But it all goes thrown under wildlife,
right?
So it's a wildlife amendment,
right?
So they were able to just throw it on there. Then there's no hearing, there's no whatever,
no committee,
no nothing, and DNR apparently didn't even
really
know about it.
So does it look pretty ominous, like it's going to probably pass?
It's unfortunately, it goes to the governor's desk on Tuesday.
Oh, if the governor signs it, which he's probably going to sign just for the other stuff.
Exactly.
It probably has nothing to do with the
pass.
venomous. So now all the people in South Carolina will be screwed.
Big crunch time, so they need as much help as possible getting phone calls in and emails into the governor's office.
Yeah, the only thing we can hope for is the governor a Republican or it's probably Republican. I would imagine.
I think
South Carolina.
I don't know.
I would think. I wonder if we can find it out.
Yeah.
So
governor of
the
South
governor
Carolina
can't just do one part of the bill. It's like the whole.
No, but
thing?
he can send it back.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
he can send it back.
The governor could say, "I'm not going to sign this unless you take this out."
Yeah.
Republican.
Yeah, I figured that. So I mean, there's a chance. And I don't want to get political, but Democrats, Democratic governors typically will pass more legislation that is anti-animal than Republican. That's just fact. I mean, it's not saying anything bad about either party, but So, I mean, there's a chance if enough people contact the
Make the
governor's
stink,
offer,
yeah.
the governor, like you said, Lucas, he can't pass part of it. He has to pass all of it or none of it. But he can send it back and say, rewrite this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sign this into law unless you rewrite this.
Yeah.
But it is a tough thing for a governor to take a stance on venomous snakes.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? Because he can't send most. If he just keeps sending bills back and back and back, he's gonna lose his position eventually. So sometimes they'll just say, "Yeah, I don't agree with this, but I'm just gonna sign it."
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy because South Carolina is one of those states where there's like no real legislation when it comes to venomous reptiles. So you're going from basically do whatever the heck you want to like, oh, sorry, if you keep any of it, you're screwed.
Yeah. Now, do you know, is it the way that, and I haven't read the law, the bill, but is it like immediate, like you got to get rid of them, or is there a grandfather clause, or is there? I
don't know. It might have been stated. I only like just perused it a little bit and then like was like, Phil, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
You know, what's going on?
I tell you what, this year has been wild, hasn't it? I mean, in all the years that I've been doing this, there's never been more legislation proposed in literally 5 months than any year ever. I'm talking like to the factor of 10.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So I think whatever happened, I think as soon as the administration switched and stuff like that, just the animal rights people just charged.
Jumped
And wow, they're really making some impact. The good news is we've been beating most of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Which has been good. But that's why we need to support USARC. That's why we need to donate. We need to follow along on those alerts. And it doesn't matter if it's like if you're in Michigan or South Carolina, you need to stick up for your other states because what passes in South Carolina is going to eventually pass in Michigan and every other state.
It will trickle down.
100%, 100%. And I think one of the big things with this too is, I mean, I don't know what it's like for other states, but it sets a really ridiculous precedent where it's like, oh, you can just add any kind of amendment in if it's any kind of related, and then
that's
there's
the
no
government,
hearing
and,
or
and
whatever.
that's the government, and that's how a lot of times they get through laws that won't make it through committee.
Right.
Is they just put it into an appropriations bill, and bam, you're done. You know, it's like it's on, and that's it's scary. You know, so I for my brother in South Carolina, we're here with you. We'll support you the best we can.
For sure.
Austin says, how do we 100% know that pieds aren't a co-dom? Because a lot of hets have amazing markers, but what separates the visual from not being a super instead of a recessive?
So this is an interesting thing.
It is an interesting one.
Well, right, and you can tell me this too. You know, really, to be honest with you, it's just nomenclature.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, let's say an ivory ball python is just really the recessive of the visual het yellow belly.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like really, whether you call it an incomplete dominant, a co-dominant, or a recessive, it's really works the same way. It's a 1 in 4 odd, you know, so yes, pieds do have, the thing with pieds is that not every pied has a marker, and not every pied marker is a het pied.
Yep.
You know, you can have normal ball pythons that have het pied markers that are not het pied. They're not het pied. Whereas with like yellow bellies and other incomplete dominant, the yellow belly is always going to be a yellow belly. It's always going to be there's always going to be a super. But in the grand scheme of things, you could say visual hets are just hets, not incomplete dominant.
Right.
You know, theoretically, it's a nomenclature thing, but it's just, you know, it's just the way it is. I mean, it's like similar to paints and het paints, right? Mm-hmm. You know, there used to be het paints and paints now, or there used to be, there used to be paints and super paints,
right,
and now they're het paints and paints, you know, because they went from
crazy.
like an incomplete dominant with a super version to now recessive with. So
you want to breed ball pythons?
Yeah. Speaking of paints, I love that project. I'm surprised more people aren't working. I guess Sentinels are the same thing now. And is there another? I think there's another one.
There's one more.
I think there's like a third one that they're all the same.
Yeah.
It's like it's like it's like Coral Glows and bananas, right?
Yeah.
Bananas,
lesser and butter and
butter, and
the list goes on.
Calico and sugar.
Yep.
And,
cinnamon and black pastel.
Yes. It's all Yeah, Lori ball pythons and het ready xanthic.
Yeah. Oh, 100%
That's different,
same, dude.
Yeah. Don't get me started. Start throwing down.
I like when Brian gets riled up, man.
Oh, dude, it's the best.
You know, Donnie and I were talking about that one day because I was showing him the clip where I was like, man, like Brian was like going in.
fired up, yeah.
And he was like, man, you should do that more. Like it's so intense.
Yeah. Oh, I get.
When it's solo snake talks in here, we'll get into it.
Yeah, we get into it. Like, that's the thing about the podcast people don't understand is like, I'll talk about anything about anybody. I'm like just really honest on our podcast. You know, like I try not to even be political on the podcast as far as like being politically correct. If I don't like what something like Brian Cusco, you know, he's a great friend of mine, but I'll say fuck you about getting my hair cut. You know what I mean? It's not anything against him, Brian. I love Brian. You know what I mean? I'm not saying anything against him, but I'm not afraid to say that was just a clickbaity type of thing to try to get views. You know what I mean? You know, none of us are cutting our hair off. You know what I mean?
Not one. That's the best.
Not one.
Like, it would be good at least
you know?
if a couple of you did, but like not one's gonna do it.
The guys who would already have short hair.
Right. Yeah. And he lost his cred when he cut his hair off.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I love Brian, and I'm not bashing him. But I'm just saying, like, I don't pull any punches, and I'll say whatever I say on the podcast. Whereas on the vlog, I'm much more politically correct.
Damn, son.
Can we rail this in?